This is a palliative care advisory group, and we got started in August of 2000 when we were a planning group. And after our palliative care program got started here, and we got our medical director, Carl Alexander, we turned into the Palliative Care Advisory Group, and we meet every second and fourth Thursday to just go through all kinds of events that have happened for a period of 2 weeks around palliative care here at the Medical Center. So we're glad to have you here.
Thank you.
If we could just go around the table and say who we are and what we do, then it's Linda. Lynn, we'll start with you.
Hi, I'm Lynn Wood, Director of Respiratory Care Services.
Hi, I'm Susan Carroll Roy, Director of Pastoral Care.
Kathy Corbett, Chaplain for the Palliative Care Service.
My name is Kristen Lafferty, and I'm the Palliative Care Social Worker.
And I'm Janet Ward, I'm the Palliative Care Nurse.
Carla Alexander, I'm Medical Director for the Palliative Care Service.
Jean Tucker-Mann,
Director of Social Work.
Director of Social Work, Palliative Care, Patient Advocacy.
Dr. Tim Key in Family Medicine.
And Margaret Ferrone, I'm a Palliative Care Nurse.
Okay.
Please, well.
Yes.
Okay, I have an announcement, and this is one that is kind of a twisting announcement. Twisting on one good side and twisting to a bad side. Kathy Corbett will be leaving us. Kathy, why don't you say why and where and what?
I have been called to be the rector of St. Luke's Episcopal Church in Brighton, Maryland, a congregation of 40, in a church that seats 100, and my job is going to be filling the seats. I was called on Monday evening, and I will be leaving on November 14th, will be my last day here. And I start there November 17th. So I thought I needed a couple of days rest before I launch into something completely and utterly new for me. So I've been in hospitals my whole career and my whole life. And this will be very different.
So why don't we just move right into the team discussion? And our case or cases today will sort of deal with the issue of dying, how we manage with patients and with families, and some of the issues that are addressed. And open up, Jen.
Right now, we have about 13 patients, which is a relatively quiet week for us. Last week and the week before, we had close to 24, which was, and each one was very sick. But I thought an interesting discussion would be for us to talk about two patients that were both discharged last week. One of whom was, and they both came in essentially the same time to the hospital. They came in approximately 60 days before discharge, plus or minus a day ahead of each other. One was a young man, how old was Brian? How old was he? 26?
No, actually, he was
He
younger
was
than that.
25. 25-year-old with pancreatitis. And the other was an elderly man with the same diagnosis. And we got the referrals pretty much at the same time. And it was a good example of people who were actively being cared for, hoping for full recovery, but had a devastating illness and were devastatingly ill. And the younger man was just discharged last week to a rehab center and is slowly but steadily improving. The older man, unfortunately, last week died. So, and it was very telling and rewarding and meaningful, I think, for all of the team to work with both of those families and simultaneously ride the storm, what I call riding the storm. In fact, both patients, this is unusual, were in the same unit, and the families of both patients got to know each other and even supported each other, which we, of course, encouraged and liked. So I thought that was pretty parallel situation for what we do day in and day out, helping patients and families come to grips with often a new diagnosis and or at least a guarded prognosis, if not a poor prognosis, and see their ebb and flow of dealing with that as the system tries to do. And as patients have good days and bad days, or good hours and bad hours.
But those two cases together really demonstrate what we call palliative care now, because they both had the same diagnosis. And the only real difference is that one was older and one was very young. And so the young person lived through the problem and the older person didn't. And so, but we were actually giving supportive care to the younger patient and his family, and then more like end-of-life care, to the, to the older man. And that's such a perfect demonstration of what we think of as palliative care, to support illness throughout and also at the end of life.
And either one could have survived, and either one could have died. So you don't know. It wasn't, the age probably was
A
the determining factor, but it could have gone well.
Well, as far as my discipline is concerned, they were brought in 2 days apart with the same illness and had to have the same surgery and had a lot of very complicated drains and things like that. The younger man's mother is a very devout Christian, and this younger man had been pretty much paralyzed by a terrible psychiatric history. And his mother has always been his strongest advocate. She was able to speak out very knowledgeably about his psychiatric diagnosis and how what worked for him and what didn't work for him. And she knew when he was getting into trouble, she would say, he's getting into trouble, I have to talk to the doctors now. She was very prayerful. She believed that that God will touch her son and he will be healed. She knew what he was up against was very complicated, but that had been his life. This medical condition was just as complicated to her as his psychiatric condition. And she was going to support him through that, and was always there on rounds and telling the doctors what they needed to do.
Part of the work that I did with Mr. H was, with Mrs. H, was really just helped to kind of move her along in the process in her understanding of what was going on. She really needed knowledge and education, and she had a notebook and would write down all of her any kind of information that the doctors gave her, and that was gold to her, was information and being able to sit down with the doctors. And so we orchestrated a family meeting for her, but also she wasn't I guess to the point where she even really wanted to think about the what if when we first met her, the what could happen, the fact that her husband could die. So, it was important for us as a team to kind of be with her where she was. And I think that's why it was so good to have this other woman, Mrs. K, I guess, to support, because they were the caregivers together. Sometimes it's so hard for us to be on our side, the staff side.